the man who patrolled without pay. Before police had ranks, uniforms, or protection, there were men who walked the streets alone. One of them was Elias Morin. He lived in the early 1700s, when cities relied on night watchmen. Poor men armed with nothing but a lantern, a wooden staff, and their word. Elias was not chosen for strength or influence. He was chosen because he refused bribes. That alone made him dangerous. Elias came from nothing. His father died in debt, his mother in illness. When the city offered him work as a watchman, the pay was barely enough to eat. But he accepted without complaint. To him, order was worth more than comfort. Every night he walked the same streets, narrow alleys where thieves whispered, market roads stained with blood from old riots. He memorized every shadow, every broken step. He learned when silence meant peace and when it meant death. Criminals hated him, not because he was violent, but because he was predictable. Elias did not change his rules depending on the man in front of him. Rich or poor, friend or stranger, brother or enemy, it made no difference. The law was weak, but his loyalty was not. Once a smuggler offered him a month's pay to look the other way. Elias refused. The next week, the smuggler's men beat him and left him bleeding in the snow. He returned to duty the same night. Another time, a fellow watchman begged him to hide evidence. "We are brothers," the man said. Elias turned him in. From that night on, he was alone. Years passed. His back bent. His hand shook. New men joined the watch, men who laughed, drank, and took coins quietly. Elias stayed the same, too honest for promotion, too loyal to survive comfortably. When age weakened him, the city dismissed him. No pension, no ceremony, just a handshake and silence. He spent his final years guarding nothing, walking the streets out of habit, correcting wrongs no one asked him to fix. He helped criminals escape worse men. He warned former enemies of danger. His loyalty no longer belonged to the city, but to his own code. Elias Morin died unnoticed. No record marks the day. No grave carries his name. But old city letters mention a strange thing. Crime rose sharply after one old watchman stopped walking his route. History forgot him, but the streets remembered. Loyalty after the badge. Retirement still didn't seem like freedom to Elias Morin. It was instead like being cast out. The city took his lantern first. Then he lost his staff. Finally, he was stripped of his authority. What they couldn't seize was the habit he had of sleeping in his uniform every night. His room was now even smaller, a rented space above a butcher's shop where the smell of old blood had never gone away. He was still eating on bread and water and relied on his memories. The city no longer employed him, but the streets still called his name, gently. So he began to walk, without any uniform or protection, just an old man walking through the shadows that once recognized him. Thieves chuckled when they saw him, and some mocked him, but others merely stepped aside. They remembered him. Elias no longer made arrests. He had now lost the power to enforce the law. Instead, he turned into something even more dangerous, a witness. He watched deals unfold and listened to whispers. He cautioned children away from the dangers of the streets where knives were waiting. He knocked on doors before fires could start. The city did not appreciate him. One snowy winter night, Elias encountered a boy stealing food from a merchant's cart. The boy was shivering, expecting punishment from Elias, but the man saw himself in the trembling hands. He let the boy go. That same night, a former enemy followed Elias home. The man he once arrested, now rich, powerful, and unafraid. The man could have killed him without hesitation. Instead, he offered him protection. "Men like you should not walk alone," the criminal said with a twisted grin. Elias refused. Loyalty meant something more to him than choosing sides or abiding by the rules. It meant refusing to leave his comrades behind. As the months passed, violence escalated. With an honest officer assigned to watch over them, the city began to fall apart faster. Friends became villains and enemies turned enemies. Elias spoke against it when he could, but his voice lacked any weight. One evening he was pulled into an alley. Men dressed in the city's uniforms accused him of tampering with evidence. They accused him of undermining the law and spreading discord among the people. They beat him slowly, meticulously, without intending to harm him. Instead, they wanted him to stay retired. One winter night, one of those same men visited Elias in his home. The man who had once arrested him, now rich and free, offered him protection. "Men like you should stay retired," the criminal whispered kindly. Elias refused. Loyalty to him was not about choosing a side or committing to the rules. It was about refusing to abandon those who trusted him. As the years passed, more violence erupted. With an unwavering officer at the forefront, the city began to crumble faster. Even those who thought of themselves as heroes turned out to be monsters. Elias spoke against it all, but his voice could only echo in the silence. The city that tried to erase him. Elias Morin was dead. At least that is what the city told itself. There was no funeral worth remembering. No bell rang. No priest spoke his name aloud. He was lowered into the ground before sunrise, buried among men who had mattered just as little to history. The records listed him as unemployed. Nothing more. By noon the city was busy again. But death did not end Elias Morin's presence. It only removed his body. Within days things began to shift. Crimes that had once been quiet grew reckless. Thieves no longer checked corners twice. Guards grew bolder, crueler. The balance Elias had held, by nothing more than his eyes. And his reputation was gone. And everyone felt it. A merchant was killed on a street Elias once patrolled nightly. A child disappeared near the old chapel, where he had arrested his own brother years ago. Fires spread faster, unchecked. The city had erased a man, and in doing so, erased its restraint. Some remembered him then. An old woman left bread outside her door for the watchman, though she knew he would never come. A former criminal crossed himself whenever he passed Elias's route. Even guards avoided certain alleys after dark, as if the stones themselves were watching. The officials noticed the rumors. They laughed at first. Then they ordered his name removed from what little record remained. They claimed he had been weak, obsolete, a relic of a failed system. Anyone who spoke of him was accused of spreading fear. But fear does not need permission. People began to say they saw him. An old man standing beneath a broken lamp, a shadow moving where no one else walked, footsteps pacing the streets at the same hour every night. Never fast, never slow, always steady. Criminals who mocked the stories vanished or turned themselves in, shaking, unable to explain why. One guard confessed to a murder he had hidden for years. He said Elias Morin stood in his doorway all night staring, saying nothing. The city tried to deny it. They called it guilt, madness, coincidence. But deep down they knew the truth. Elias Morin had become what the city deserved. Not a hero, not a ghost, a reminder. He did not punish. He did not forgive. He only watched, just as he always had, loyal not to law, but to balance. Years passed. New rulers came. New laws replaced old ones. And still, some streets remained untouched by crime. No one built there. No one dared. History books never wrote his name. But the city learned something it never wanted to admit. You can dismiss an honest man. You can retire him. You can bury him. But you cannot erase loyalty that was given without condition. And somewhere, when the night grows quiet enough, the forgotten watchman still walks, keeping order in a city that never deserved him. The city tried to move forward. Years had passed since Elias Morin was buried without a name. Yet something in the city refused to heal. New guards walked the streets now, louder, rougher, armed with authority but lacking restraint. They enforced law with fists instead of judgment. And still, the footsteps continued. Every night, at the same hour Elias once began his patrol, the sound returned. Slow, even, measured, always following the same path, never chasing, never running. At first, people told themselves it was coincidence, wood contracting in the cold. Rats on stone whined through empty lanes. Then a guard disappeared. He had been cruel, known for bribes, known for violence. His body was found at dawn, untouched by weapon or wound, his face frozen in terror, eyes wide open as if he had seen something he was never meant to see. In his clenched fist was a single object, an old brass button from a watchman's coat. Panic spread quietly. Officials ordered night patrols doubled. Lanterns burned brighter. Weapons were carried openly. But the brighter the lights grew, the darker the city felt. Men began refusing certain routes. Others quit without explanation. Those who stayed spoke in whispers. They said the old watchman was no longer walking for the city. He was walking against it. A young guard, new, uncorrupted, claimed he saw Elias clearly one night. Not as a shadow, not as a rumor, as a man, old, bent, standing beneath a broken lamp. "What do you want?" the guard asked, trembling. Elias said nothing. He only pointed toward a house where cries were being ignored. The guard went. He stopped a murder that night. When he returned, Elias was gone. Word spread among the poor, among criminals, among children who slept hungry. The watchman appeared only where injustice was strongest. He did not protect the innocent alone. He punished betrayal. Not with violence, with exposure. Secrets leaked. Hidden crimes surfaced. Men in power fell without knowing why. Every path led back to the same truth. Someone was still watching. The city council made a final decision. They would erase Elias Morin completely. They burned records, changed street names, demolished the chapel. They believed if nothing remained, the footsteps would stop. They were wrong, because Elias was never tied to paper, stone, or memory. He was tied to the streets, and streets remember. On the anniversary of his death, every bell in the city rang at midnight, without being touched. Footsteps echoed through every district at once, and for the first time the city understood. Elias Morin had not become a ghost. He had become a judgment that could not be retired. And his patrol had only just begun. The guard who followed him. The young guard's name was Thomas Hale. He had joined the watch believing the city could still be fixed. He believed rules mattered. He believed men could choose to be better. The older guards laughed at him for that. Thomas was the first to follow the footsteps instead of running from them. The night Elias Morin appeared to him, Thomas did not sleep. He stood beneath the broken lamp long after the old watchman vanished, heart pounding, lantern shaking in his hand. He told no one what he had seen. But the next night he waited. The footsteps came again, slow, steady, familiar. Though Thomas had never walked beside Elias in life, he followed at a distance, careful not to speak. The figure never looked back. They moved through streets Thomas had been ordered to avoid, places where guards took bribes to look away, where cries were ignored because answering them was inconvenient. Elias stopped outside a locked door. Inside, a man was beating his wife. Thomas broke the door. When it was over, when the man lay restrained and sobbing, Thomas turned to thank the old watchman. He was gone. From that night on, Thomas followed the footsteps whenever they appeared. He learned the pattern, not every night, not everywhere. Only where loyalty had been betrayed. Only where injustice had become routine. Other guards noticed Thomas changing. He refused bribes. He questioned orders. He spoke Elias's name aloud. That was his mistake. The captain summoned him. "Ghost stories weaken authority," the captain said. "Forget the old watchman." Thomas tried, truly. But one night Elias led him somewhere different, outside the city walls, to a shallow grave near the river. Elias stopped and for the first time turned. His face was not rotten, not monstrous, just tired. Elias pointed at the ground. Thomas dug until dawn. They found bones, shackled wrists, a badge crushed into the mud, evidence of an execution that had never been recorded, a crime committed by men still wearing the city's colors. The city panicked when Thomas tried to report it. The grave vanished by morning. The report disappeared. Thomas was accused of fabricating evidence, of treason. They arrested him. In the cell, bleeding and confused, Thomas finally spoke to the darkness. "Why me?" Elias appeared beyond the bars. "Because loyalty recognizes loyalty." That night the cell door opened on its own. Thomas walked out of the prison unseen. By morning the city claimed he had escaped, that he was dangerous, that he was a traitor. But among the poor another story spread. They said the old watchman had chosen a successor, not to replace him, but to walk beside him. Because one honest man can be forgotten, two become a warning. Loyalty turns into a curse. Thomas Hale stopped sleeping. Whenever he closed his eyes, he heard the footsteps, slow, certain, unforgiving. They followed him even when Elias was not there, echoing inside his skull like a sentence that could not be appealed. He was no longer a guard. He was a hunted man. The city posted notices with his face drawn poorly but recognizably. Traitor, criminal, enemy of order. The same words Elias Morin had once worn silently, long before death made him untouchable. Elias began appearing more often now, not to guide, but to test. He led Thomas into places where no choice was clean. A starving thief stealing medicine, a guard following orders he did not believe in, a former criminal protecting a child while hiding a knife behind his back. "Tell me what to do," Thomas begged one night. Elias said nothing. Because loyalty, Thomas learned, does not come with instructions. Each decision changed him. Each choice burned something away. When Thomas spared the thief, someone else suffered. When he punished the guard, chaos followed. The city did not want balance. It wanted control. And Elias had never served control. Rumors shifted. People no longer spoke of a watchman. They spoke of the watch. Two shadows now moved through the streets, one old, one young. Criminals feared the silence before the footsteps. Guards feared mirrors. Men confessed without being accused. But loyalty has a cost. Thomas's family paid it first. His brother was dismissed from his trade. His mother was questioned, threatened, watched. The city could not reach Elias, so it reached through Thomas. "End this," they told him. "Disappear." That night, Thomas confronted Elias beneath the broken lamp. "This isn't justice," Thomas said. "This is punishment." Elias looked at him for a long time. Then for the first time he spoke. "It always was." The truth hit Thomas harder than any blow. Elias had never believed the city could be saved. Only slowed, balanced, reminded of consequences. Loyalty was not hope. It was resistance. And resistance demands sacrifice. The next patrol was different. Elias led Thomas to the city council hall. Inside, men planned arrests, executions, erasures. They spoke of order while destroying it. Thomas hesitated. "If we interfere," he whispered, "there's no return." Elias stepped forward. For the first time, his footsteps made sound inside a room full of men. Every head turned. Lanterns flickered. Men screamed, not in fear of death, but in recognition. They knew him, the honest watchman they buried, the man they failed to erase. Thomas understood then. Elias was no longer protecting the city. He was holding it accountable, and anyone who walked beside him would never live a normal life again. When dawn came, 3 council members were gone. Not dead, exposed, stripped of power, left alive to face what they had hidden. The city declared war. And loyalty, once quiet, once noble, became a curse that could not be lifted. The bell that rang for no one. By the time winter bent the city into silence, the old cop had learned something cruel. Honesty does not grow old with dignity, it grows thin. The bell at the western watchtower rang only once that night. Not an alarm, not a warning. A single, hollow note that drifted across the frozen streets like a prayer already forgiven. He was retired, his badge turned dull as a dead coin. Yet his body moved before his mind could argue. Habit was stronger than age. He wrapped his threadbare coat around himself and walked. The western quarter was where forgotten men went to disappear. Dock laborers with broken hands, widows with no names left, children who learned early not to cry. Years ago, he had patrolled these streets with a straight back and clear eyes. He had arrested thieves who later fed his family. He had spared murderers who later buried his brothers. Still, he had remained loyal to the law, to his enemies, to his own quiet code. That loyalty had cost him everything except sleep, and even that came rarely. Near the watchtower, he found the body. A young constable lay twisted in the snow, blood already darkening to black. His eyes were open, fixed on the bell rope above, fingers frozen as if still trying to pull it. No marks of robbery, no sign of struggle, just fear, pure, unfiltered fear. The old cop knelt with difficulty. He recognized the boy, honest, too honest, the kind that still believed rules protected people. That kind never lasted. Footsteps echoed behind him. 3 men emerged from the fog, cloaks heavy, faces half hidden. Brothers once. Men he had trained, defended, and lied for. They did not greet him. "You should go home," one of them said softly. "This isn't your night." The old man stood. His knees screamed. His spine felt like it would snap. Still, he stood. "You killed him," he said. Not a question. "We followed orders." Orders. That word had poisoned more souls than plague. He rang the bell, another man muttered. He saw something he wasn't meant to. The old cop looked up at the silent rope. He understood then. The boy had tried to warn the city, and the city, as always, had chosen sleep. "Who gave the order?" the old man asked. They hesitated. Just a breath, long enough. He nodded. "I already know." One stepped forward. "You're retired. Let this die, like everything else." The old cop smiled, a tired, broken thing. "I gave my life to this city," he said. "If I let this die, then I die again." Steel flashed. Cold air burned his lungs. He did not fight like a young man. He fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Every movement was slow, deliberate, honest. He took a blade to the shoulder, a boot to the ribs. He fell, rose, fell again. In the end, they left him bleeding beside the boy, because killing him would have been mercy. By morning, the body was gone. The bell rope cut. Official records would say the constable froze drunk on duty. Official records would forget the old cop entirely. But somewhere in the city, whispers began. about a bell that rang once, about an honest boy, about a retired cop who refused to stay dead. And the city, uneasy in its sleep, turned slightly toward waking. Snow doesn't remember blood. The city erased things efficiently. By dawn, the snow had done its work, soft, patient, obedient. Where the boy had died, there was only clean white ground. Where the old cop had bled, nothing remained but a faint rust-colored memory beneath ice. Snow doesn't remember blood. People choose not to. The old man woke in a cellar that smelled of damp stone and old onions. His shoulder burned like a brand pressed into bone. Someone had stitched him with clumsy hands and rough thread. He didn't need to ask who had helped him. Only forgotten people helped forgotten men. A woman sat nearby, sharpening a kitchen knife that had seen better years. Her hair was gray, her eyes sharper than steel. "You should have died," she said without looking up. "So they tell me," he replied. She slid him a cup of warm broth. "They dragged the boy's name through the records this morning. Called him a drunk. Said he rang the bell as a joke." The old cop closed his eyes. Lies always sounded cleaner in daylight. "They're scared," the woman continued. "That bell wasn't meant to ring. Not anymore." He drank slowly. Each swallow hurt. "Fear means something still works," he said. "When there's no fear, rot has won." Outside, the city moved on. Merchants argued prices. Children chased each other through slush. Somewhere a judge signed papers with a steady hand, approving silence. The machine kept breathing. By evening, whispers reached the cellar. Dock workers talked of wagons moving at night without permits. A priest muttered about confession rooms being used for meetings. And always the same names circled. Men high enough to never be seen, powerful enough to never be blamed. The old cop wrapped his wound and stood. His body protested loudly. He ignored it. Pain had never been a reason to stop. At the eastern bridge, he watched shadows cross the river under lantern light. Crates changed hands. No seals, no markings. He recognized the pattern. Bribes didn't move like that. Weapons did. A voice behind him said, "You're not invisible." He didn't turn. "I never was." The man who stepped beside him was young, but his eyes were already tired. A clerk, low rank, the kind who still believed papers mattered. "They killed a constable for this," the clerk whispered. "I saw the orders. They're burning records now." "Why tell me?" the old cop asked. "Because no one else will listen," the clerk swallowed. "And because you're already dead." The old man smiled faintly. That was the kindest title he'd had in years. From the bridge, a bell rang in the distance, faint, uncertain. Not the Western Tower, another, someone testing courage. The clerk's face went pale. "That's not supposed to—" "I know," the old cop said, already walking away. Snow crunched beneath his boots as the sound faded. Somewhere another honest soul had chosen noise over safety. The city tightened its grip, preparing to crush what dared to move. And the old cop, stitched together by strangers and stubborn will, stepped back into the dark, not to save the city, but to make sure it remembered what it tried to bury. The sound meant fear. The second bell rang wrong. Not loud, not proud. It trembled like a hand unsure whether to knock or pray. That was how the old cop knew the ringer was young or desperate or both. Courage before it hardens always shakes. He followed the sound through alleys narrowed by age and neglect. Windows watched him without faces. Doors listened. The city had learned to hear danger before it learned to see it. The bell stood in a small square near the old grain offices. A place removed from maps after a fire no one bothered to investigate. A boy stood beneath it, no older than 15, hands still on the rope. His breath came fast, white clouds breaking apart in the cold. "You shouldn't ring it again," the old cop said gently. The boy jumped. "They're moving people," he blurted. "Not goods, people in crates. I saw one open." The old man felt something old and sharp twist inside him. He had spent a lifetime pretending this kind of thing was rumor. Retirement had stripped him of that comfort. "Did anyone see you?" he asked. The boy hesitated. That was answer enough. Boots approached, measured, confident. Not the rush of panic. The walk of men who knew the law would not touch them. 5 this time. They didn't draw weapons immediately. Power never hurried. One of them spoke. "You really don't know when to stay buried." "I was never buried," the old cop replied. "Just ignored." The boy backed away, eyes wide. "You said the bell meant help." "It does," the old man said. "Just not the kind that comes fast." Steel came out then. The night tightened. The old cop stepped forward before fear could decide for the boy. He moved slower than he once had, but smarter. He let one man commit too much weight to a strike, twisted the wrist, felt bone give. Another blade opened his side, warm, intimate pain. He welcomed it. Pain meant he was still in the moment. The boy ran. Good. A whistle cut the air, short, coded. More were coming. The old cop backed toward the bell. His blood darkened the snow again. He wrapped the rope around his hand and pulled. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound rolled across rooftops, cracked and imperfect. Not an alarm, a memory. Doors opened a fraction. A lantern flickered. Somewhere, someone whispered a name they weren't supposed to remember. The men froze. Not because of the bell, but because of what it might wake. "You're making this worse," one hissed. "For you," the old man said. They didn't kill him. Again. They scattered instead, melting into the roots they'd practiced for years. Rats always knew where the walls were weak. By the time the square fell silent, the old cop was on his knees. He tied his coat tight against the bleeding and waited for the shaking to stop. It didn't. By morning, notices would appear blaming vandals, drunks, weather. By night, more crates would move. But something had changed. The bells were no longer silent. And the city, long trained to sleep through crime, had begun to stir, irritated, uneasy. That was always how it started. Not with justice, but with noise. When the city blinks. Cities don't wake up all at once. They blink. The morning after the bells, the city blinked hard. Notices were pasted crooked on walls, ink still wet, hands shaking as they worked. False alarms, vandalism, no threat to public order. The words were meant to calm, but they landed wrong. Too fast, too eager. Lies rushed are always louder than truth. The old cop watched from a bakery doorway. Steam from fresh bread mixing with the smell of fear. He hadn't slept. His wounds had stiffened into something heavy and dull, like a second body strapped to him. Every movement reminded him he should have died several times already. People talked, quietly, not about bells, but about movement. Wagons at hours they shouldn't move, men who didn't buy or sell anything yet owned entire streets. Children told to stay inside without being told why. That was the blink. By midday, the clerk found him again, pale, sweating, alive, for now. "They're sealing the Eastern records," the clerk whispered. "Anyone who worked near transport is being reassigned, or arrested, or sent away." "Where?" the old cop asked. The clerk shook his head. "No one knows." That's the point. They walked together through the market, blending into noise and color. The old man noticed how guards stood differently now, hands closer to hilts, eyes quicker to judge. Power felt watched. Power hated that feeling. At the old grain offices, smoke rose thin and deliberate. Papers burned slowly, fed carefully into barrels like offerings. The old cop didn't rush in. Bravery without timing was just another way to die uselessly. Instead, he listened. Names drifted from the smoke. Routes, dates. One word repeated more than the rest. Tonight, a shout broke the air. Someone had spotted them. The clerk panicked, ran. The old cop didn't follow. He knew the rules. When the city blinked, it crushed what moved too suddenly. By evening, bells were guarded. Ropes cut short. Towers locked. Silence reinforced. But silence is never complete. In a tenement stairwell, a woman hummed the rhythm of the bell pulls, 3 short, 1 long. In a tavern, a drunk tapped it on his glass. Across the river, a child knocked it into a door frame without knowing why. Patterns spread faster than orders. That night, the wagons rolled heavier than before. Desperate now, sloppy, the old cop stood on a rooftop, watching lanterns snake through streets like glowing veins. He could stop 1 wagon, maybe 2. It wouldn't matter. So he did the only honest thing left. He stepped into the light. Right in front of them, guards shouted. Steel flashed. Someone laughed, nervous and cruel. "It's just the old one," a voice said. "The ghost." The old cop raised his empty hands. Blood soaked his coat. His back was bent. He looked exactly like a man the city could kill without consequence. "I rang the bell," he said calmly. "I'll do it again." For a moment, just one, the wagons stopped. That moment was everything. Because windows opened. Because faces appeared. Because the city, mid-blink, saw something standing where fear should have been. Orders were shouted to move, to strike, to finish it. And as the first blow came down, the old cop smiled. Not because he was winning, but because the city had finally looked. And once a city looks, it can never fully close its eyes again.